Downing Street has been accused of blocking true blue Conservative candidates from standing in the general election as it wages a battle for the future of the Tory party. Those on the right of the party believe that Rishi Sunak is trying to purge it of those who support low-tax, small-state conservatism so that it will be dominated by centrists after the election. Writing in The Telegraph today, their top columnist Alison Pearson goes as far as to argue that even a young Margaret Thatcher wouldn't get on the candidate list in today's Tory party. Is this true? Well, let's speak to the former aide to Margaret Thatcher, foreign policy analyst and contributor to the Telegraph newspaper, Nile Gardner. Nile, Margaret Thatcher famously led the Conservatives for over a decade, winning 3 landslide election victories and transforming Britain. How has the Conservative Party changed since she was in charge?
Well, Mark, thank you very much for having me on the show today. And I think, unfortunately, the Conservative Party has changed dramatically over the course of the last 2 or 3 decades since the end of the Thatcher era. And it has changed for the worse. The party has shifted significantly leftwards on many fronts recently, especially under Rishi Sunak. I think under Boris Johnson, there was a reversal of the sort of leftward trend. But with Boris's exit and then, of course, the removal of Liz Truss, the party has moved back to its sort of leftward shifting trajectory. And I think that Margaret Thatcher would be hugely dismayed with the direction the Conservative Party is moving today. And I think she would be greatly saddened to see the current state of the Conservative Party now heading, according to most polls, towards a historic defeat unless things are dramatically changed. And it's very disappointing to see where the Conservative Party is today, dominated basically by what Margaret Thatcher would have called wets, lefties, really, anti-Thatcherites. And I think that the Conservative Party is in a downward spiral and trajectory. Hopefully, after the election, there will be new Thatcherite leadership that can restore conservatism to the Conservative Party, which is greatly needed.
Why have the Tories shifted to the centre, do you think, Niall? Is it the influence of Tony Blair? Is it the idea that the centre ground is where elections are won and lost?
Yeah, that's a good point. I do think that Blair's election victories certainly had a big impact upon the Conservatives' own direction. And I think the Cameron years certainly represented a significant shift to the centre ground, even towards the left, actually, under David Cameron. And it's absolutely astonishing that Cameron is now back in the cabinet as Foreign Secretary, lecturing the Israelis about how to conduct their war against Hamas. And I think the fact that you have Cameron back in the cabinet is an illustration of just how far the Conservative government has fallen today. And we need another Thatcherite revolution inside the Conservative Party. It really needs to have a fundamental shake-up, really. And I have to say that at the moment, the outlook is incredibly grim. The Conservatives can only win if they stand upon a platform of conservative policies. Otherwise, their own voters will abandon them, as they are doing now. Of course, many are moving towards reform. But a large number of the Conservative Party voters cannot see any value in today supporting the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party has to rediscover its Thatcherite and Churchillian roots. It has to move to the right if it has any hope of winning elections again.
Let's, if we can, Niall, bring in my top pundits to join the conversation. Journalist and writer Benedict, Spence, political commentator Rebecca Jane, and columnist and television personality Nina Mishkov. Benedict, if Margaret Thatcher was in the Conservative Party, how would she be characterised at this moment in time? And would she have any chance of becoming leader?
I mean, I think she'd have a fantastic chance of becoming leader, but that's just because all it takes is for somebody to throw their hat in the ring, and that person is
just to interrupt you briefly, Benedict, just to interrupt you briefly, wouldn't Margaret Thatcher, if she was on the Tory backbenches, now be labelled an extremist or far right?
Extremist in terms of her economic policy, maybe. I think Liz Truss has done a wonderful job of setting fire to the reputation of Thatcherite Tories. That's not necessarily a reflection on the ideology itself, and I think a lot more to do with the calibre of the Prime Minister in question. But actually, I think that that's a much more important question. What we're talking about now is, the sort of who is going to be the candidates in the next general election. Are they going to be sort of, one nation Tories? Are they going to be, yellow Tories, as they're called, basically indistinguishable from Liberal Democrats, or are they going to be further to the right? Actually, what I think is far more important in many ways is having MPs who are vaguely competent, because actually the thing that we've found throughout this period of Conservative rule, the sheer number of Conservative MPs who are not up to the task of being MPs, let alone ministers, forget them being ministers. Actually, a lot of them, whatever their stripes may be, are not, I think, what members of the public would come to expect of their MPs. So,
Rebecca Jane,
if we're talking about actually getting back support, I think people just want to see an MP who, even if they differ on them on certain things, you get the sense that that person can at least do the job. That's
do the job and can stand for something. Rebecca Jane and Nina, briefly, if you can. I'll start with you, Rebecca Jane. A very good email's come in from Basil, who says, "Hi, Mark, it's the members that make a political party, not the people at HQ. If HQ ignore the wishes of its members, then that party does not deserve to survive. The Conservative Party doesn't seem to understand why its former members are defecting to Reform UK and your former party of UKIP."
No, they're not, Mark. They're going over to Reform, but they're not going over to UKIP. That's a lot of nonsense. No, it's completely true. At the end of the day, the Conservative Party are not doing the will of the people, and that's the bit that they're missing. We've got to take all of this back to basics. Nobody actually votes for Rishi Sunak because they think he's a competent leader. People are scared to vote for alternative parties. People are scared to vote for Reform because it's not about the person that you're actually putting up in a political campaign. It's about who's got the most money and the biggest marketing campaign.
Okay.
Scrap the system and start again.
Briefly, Nina, your thoughts on how Margaret Thatcher would be characterised if she was around today? Would she be lumped in with Suella Braverman?
Well, she probably would be, but I don't know. I don't know what planet you're on in deifying Margaret Thatcher in this way. We're still living with the damage that she's wreaked. Look at our water. She sold off. She put profits before people, and we're still. Look at the housing crisis, selling off council houses so that, and not building enough to replace them. We are still reaping the damage, and it makes me laugh. It makes me weep actually to think that she caused so much that's wrong with this country at the moment, and yet she's still seen as this glorious leader. She may have been a leader. She was a strong woman, but that's where it begins and ends for me.
OK. Niall, I've only got a couple of seconds. Who would the Thatcherite heir apparent be in the current Conservative Party, do you think?
Well, I think just very briefly, if I could respond to Nina's comments, absolutely outrageous, frankly. Margaret Thatcher, of course, was a truly great leader. She defeated, of course, the scourge of socialism. She left Britain in a far better place than she found it in the first place. And I think the British people should be hugely grateful, of course, to Margaret Thatcher for her leadership. With regard to future leaders of the Conservative Party, I think there are several very strong contenders, especially Suella Braverman and also Priti Patel as well. I think there are two very strong conviction politicians, strong Thatcherites. They are far more conservative in every respect than Rishi Sunak. And I think the Conservative Party has to move to the right if it has any hope of long-term survival and winning future elections. It has to ditch all these wishy-washy liberal-style wet policies and adopt real conservative policies again.
Niall, always a thrill to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to Margaret Thatcher's former aide, foreign policy analyst, contributor to The Telegraph, Nile Gardner.